Hi, welcome. Welcome to session number 11 of the 12-week Healthy Brain Program. Tonight we're going to talk about nocebos. So most of us are familiar with placebos, which is the healing effect of a non-therapy treatment, such as a sugar pill or a fake surgery. So that's what we're going to cover tonight, placebos and nocebos. So nocebos are the exact opposite of a placebo. So instead of the healing effects, right, it's something that we believe in so strongly that it brings about the illness in our body instead of the healing effects of a placebo. So, as you know, I'm dedicated to this Healthy Brain Program because of our own family suffering from dementia and the effects that it has. And as I did the research, I came across many what would you call it? Sources. Thank you. Sources that said the effects of Alzheimer's starts decades before the actual symptoms occur, before they're visible or known. And so the time that we have is now to make healthy changes, healthy lifestyle changes, and that's what I'm all about. And so I am going to really cover nocebos, how it affects your brain and your overall health. So today I posted a quote from an article that I sent out on Facebook, and I hope you all have a chance to read that. We can only accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts and ideas that are equal to our present emotional state, and I want to include also our present beliefs. And when we do, when we accept, believe, and surrender, we program our autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals to signal certain genes that either help us or harm us. So again, the placebo or the nocebo. We can signal the power of our thoughts, right? Our beliefs can signal our autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals to signal certain genes that either promote health or fall into illness and disease. So I want you to really pay attention to that, because as we go through this program tonight, think about that. You can, with the power of your thoughts, turn on the genes that promote health, and we've talked about this throughout this program, or the genes that bring about illness. So what exactly is a nocebo? So most of us have heard of the placebo effect, the healing-inducing effect that patients in clinical trials experience when they believe, and this is important, it only happens when you believe it, that they're getting a new drug or surgery, but they're actually getting a non-therapy treatment like a sugar pill or fake surgery. And the placebo effect is real. It works about 18 to 80% of the time, and it's not just in your head. These effects are physical. The placebo effect can actually dilate bronchi, heal ulcers, make warts disappear, drop your blood pressure, and it has even been shown to make bald men who think they're getting the treatment of Rogaine. It's even made them grow new hair. That's how powerful it is. The placebo effect is the belief, the deep-seated subconscious belief in the perceived therapy to heal. But the same mind-body power that can heal you can also have the opposite effect. That's the nocebo. It can even bring about the side effects of the new drug, or it can induce illness or disease. We're going to talk about that. So interestingly, these nocebo complaints aren't random. In studies, they tend to arise in response to the side effect warnings on the actual drug or treatment. So as you know, most scientific studies have the control group. That would be where the placebo and the nocebo generally show up. And then they have the group that actually receives the treatment. But the mere suggestion that a patient may experience negative symptoms in response to the medication may be a self-fulfilling prophecy in approximately 25% of subjects. That's a lot. For example, if you tell a patient treated with a placebo he might experience nausea, he's very likely to feel nauseous. If you suggest that he may get a headache, he likely will. And patients that were given nothing but saline, who thought it was chemotherapy, actually threw up and lost their hair over the course of the treatment, even though it was saline. So the nocebo effect is probably most obvious and is absolutely the worst case scenario in voodoo death. When a person is cursed, told they will die, and then does die. So most voodoo effects can be attributed to belief. And in that culture, the voodoo culture, when one person is cursed and then dies, right, then the belief is made stronger in all others. And the stronger the belief is and the more it's fed, the more likely it is to be true. When somebody is cursed, they'll believe it to happen to them and then bring it about. So they're cursed, they're told they'll die, and then they do. That makes the belief stronger for everyone else. But the notion of voodoo death doesn't just apply to witch doctors and tribal cultures. There is much literature that shows patients who believed to be terminal and were mistakenly informed that they had only a few months to live, died within the given time frame. Even when autopsy filings revealed no physiological explanation for the early death. It was all on the belief. And remember, just like a voodoo priestess who is accurate, right, and curses people and they die, she becomes very powerful. The same is true of your doctor. Not that they're a voodoo, right, priestess, and I want to make that clear. But we give them the authority. We give them the power. We believe in what they tell us to be true. It's the belief, even if it's mistaken, right? So people have been told, mistakenly, that they had this illness when they didn't. But their body absolutely responded to the belief and brought it about exactly as the doctor predicted. So if a doctor tells someone they have an incurable illness or that they will be on this medication for the rest of their life, such as blood pressure, thyroid, lots of these, right, these hormones, or that they have only a 5-year survival prediction, they are essentially cursing them with a form of medical hexing. They don't mean to. They don't. And they're not trying to harm anyone. Absolutely, the opposite is true. Right? Doctors take an oath, and they take it seriously. They're trained to give you all of the information. They are trained to give you all of the information because of legal and ethical implications that they must adhere to. Doctors believe that they're telling it to you straight. They believe the patient deserves to know and that they should be realistic and make arrangements if that's what's necessary. So it's a quagmire of sticky issues. It absolutely is. But when they say such things, they can instill in the conscious and the subconscious mind a belief that the patient won't get well. And as long as the patient's mind holds this negative belief, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, remember, the subconscious is where your programs and beliefs are stored, and beliefs must be true. Right? We don't operate unless what we believe to be true, we can make true. As soon as we get new information that proves it to be false, we'll develop a new belief. But the belief must be true. Whatever we hold must be true. And so just like I spoke earlier, we can turn on the autonomic nervous system to produce the genes that will bring about health, or if we believe that we have a fatal illness, we'll bring about that chemistry as well. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is a truth I want you to be aware of in all health situations. If you believe you'll never recover, it is highly likely that you won't. If you believe it deep within your core, then it's highly likely that you won't. Right? It's not a given, but it's highly likely. We want the odds to be in your favor, right? That 80-20 rule, right? Practice it 80% of the time and bring that about. Most of our outcomes are not random. They're brought about by our beliefs. Our actions are driven by our beliefs. Our outcomes are a direct result of our own inner beliefs. Whew, right? So, okay, the nocebo effect is real. It absolutely is. I want you to know it applies to medications, medical procedures, and diagnoses. So, again, the false diagnosis that it was a fatal or terminal illness, right? That can create a nocebo. In medical procedures, if you're told, right, that the surgery only has a 5% chance of being successful, most of us are geared towards, right, worst case scenario. So we can have a nocebo, a belief, right, that it's not going to be effective, right, only 5%. And we'll talk a little bit about people who have a mindset of being unlucky. If you gave them the odds that they only had 5% chance, and their belief is that they're unlucky, they will focus and bring about the 95%. So later in the program, I'll go so far as to show you how the nocebo effect is real in most of your everyday situations. We experience life as we are, from here, right? Our beliefs, that's how we experience life. A placebo effect or a nocebo effect comes from within, and it affects every facet of our life. Whether that's finances, relationships, or health, it's all from within. So placebos and nocebos are the result of your own belief system. And this is a system that you, absolutely you, control. You are the controller of your belief system. You have power over your beliefs, which gives you considerable power over your life. And this is where I get really excited, you know I do. This is where I get excited, is where you have power to make positive changes. But we'll come back to that. We're still on nocebos. So the reason I wanted to cover nocebos is because we have covered a lot of information that could be used to produce a nocebo in your life. It could be used to produce a nocebo in my life or the life of my loved ones. So let's consider nocebos you may have been exposed to as we progress through the first 10 weeks of this 12-week Healthy Brain program. As you know, I showed common health habits that can harm your brain. I showed you facts about brain illnesses and all kinds of other such scary things, right? The effects. We talked about how widespread brain illnesses are. This is how scary it is. Annually, 250,000 people are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, not just dementia, Alzheimer's. And it is estimated that 4 million people are living with the disease. That's a lot of people. Strokes affect 600,000 people annually. And it's estimated that between 4 to 4.4 million people are living with the after effects of stroke. That's a lot of people. Also, stroke is the third leading cause of death in the U.S. behind heart disease and cancer. So heart disease, cancer, and stroke. Scary statistics. And many times we buy into the odds. We do. Let's say that the odds of contracting this or that is 1 out of 10 people, or 1 out of 4 people, or 1 out of 3 people, whatever that is. Whenever you're reading an article about some kind of health issue, they'll give you the odds of you contracting that disease or illness. That goes into the nocebo effect. I'll talk more about that. So if you tend to be more pessimistic and you tend to believe in the worst, right? Or if you believe yourself to be generally unlucky. I love the unlucky people. I know some in my life, right, that believe they're just unlucky. Always have been. So imagine people, and maybe it's you, who say things like, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. Murphy's Law says, right, worst case scenario, Murphy's Law is true. It's a law, and that law applies to me. Or when someone has a positive outcome, this unlucky, pessimistic person might say something like, well, it was just sheer luck, or it was dumb luck. That's the one I really like. Well, it was just dumb luck. It invalidates that the person may have contributed to their own good outcome. I want you to hear that. It invalidates that the person may have contributed to their own good outcome. Invalidates it. Because they attributed it to sheer luck or dumb luck. They attribute bad things to the luck of the draw, or it was against the odds. So you can see how this unlucky talk can create a nocebo effect based on the belief that we're unlucky, and therefore will be likely to be in the unlucky group. So that was the 5% chance of it being successful. If this unlucky person is given those odds, they're going to naturally assume they're in the 95% unlucky group. Or if the odds are 1 in 3, right? Well, then they're going to be, Murphy's Law would state that they would be one of the 3 that would get this illness. It sets up a nocebo in that person's mind that they're likely to get that. And we'll talk about that more. So we also talked about many things that hurt the brain, such as drugs and alcohol, obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes. The standard American diet, SAD, right? The SAD diet, which is filled with processed foods, pesticides, sugar, artificial colors, sweeteners, and artificial ingredients. That's the SAD diet. Chronic stress, negative thinking, even spending time with unhealthy people, right, can have an effect on our own health. And because we are in these groups, most of us are at least in one, right, we may subconsciously move into the nocebo effect based on only 1 or 2 risk factors. You may not have all of those risk factors. You may only have 1 or 2, or you may have them all. Doesn't mean it's a life sentence, and we're going to talk about that. So another way a nocebo is developed is when we cover the symptoms, right? We begin to talk about the symptoms, many of which most of us have it at some time or another. So in the case of dementia, Alzheimer's, brain illnesses, right? Forgetfulness is the most common. But guess what? It happens to all of us. But forgetfulness, right? That's the first one where we start to worry, especially when we notice it increasing. Heredity. Do you have close relatives who have the disease or who died from it? Do you hear a lot about the increased risk factors? Let's say from your doctor, your spouse, right? Spouses can really set up a nocebo. They do it out of love. They're kind of like the doctor, right? They're trying to do their very best. But repetition is one way that a belief can be developed in the subconscious. So is there a lot of repetition? They're important. These are important guidelines, right? Important. These risk factors, they can guide your health screenings. And they should encourage you to take healthy precautions and adopt a healthy lifestyle. That's what they're for. That's why they're advertised. That's why they're talked about. If you have those risk factors, it's not a death sentence. What it is should be an encouragement to you to go get the proper health screenings and to adopt a healthy lifestyle. Having a risk factor doesn't condemn you to developing the disease. This is really important. It's highlighted, and it's highlighted a lot, especially in news outlets, right? Information outlets. The risk factors are highlighted right up at the top. It's part of the attention-grabbing headline, right? But it's not a sentence. It absolutely doesn't condemn you to developing the disease. But let's take another few moments here and we'll really dig into the "it runs in my family" phenomenon, right? It runs in my family. Remember, we are geared towards worst case scenario. We are geared towards focusing on the negative. So since this is a brain health program, we're going to look at dementia and Alzheimer's, right? Because it does run in our family, okay? Understand, the "it runs in my family" phenomena applies to all health conditions such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, even arthritis, just to name a few. And the power of the placebo with an increased risk factor, and it runs in your family, known family members, is just a triple whammy in the nocebo department, right? It almost looks inevitable. So I want to talk about that again. The power of the nocebo, right? You believe that it's already in your genes, with an increased risk factor of one or more, and then a known family member. It's like a triple whammy in the nocebo department. So as you know, our family is currently dealing with family members who have dementia and other brain illness issues. So let me lay out how a nocebo could take hold in any of the blood relatives, right? These people I love so much. That's why I'm covering this, and I sent them all a message. I want them to watch. I want them to develop a nocebo effect and believe that this is inevitable for them, because it's not. They have a lot of control over it. All right, so how can a nocebo effect take hold in the blood relatives of these two people I care about so much? But also the non-blood relatives are not immune to the effects of a nocebo. I'm not immune. I'm in it, right? So from my hypnotherapy training, anytime a person is exposed to a traumatic event with an elevated emotion, a belief can develop. This can be either positive or negative, and it can also depend on the person and their understanding of the event. Right? Positive people will go through traumatic events differently, even though the emotions are elevated, than a negative person or someone who's pessimistic. So as humans, we're just hardwired to focus on the worst case scenario. We covered this many times. It's an old survival mechanism from caveman days, but we are still susceptible to it. It's using our prefrontal cortex, our conscious analytical mind, that we can overcome this predisposition to focusing on the negative, the worst case scenario. All right, so back to dementia and Alzheimer's in our family. In our case, it's on both sides of the family, both Gilbert and Christine, both. Grandparents, aunts, and uncles, all affected by the disease. Stories of sadness of watching them decline and struggle. Remember the setup for a nocebo. A known risk factor, right? The family history. In this case, it runs in the family. Check. An elevated emotion, sadness, and suffering of loved ones. It's fresh in our minds. It's already in 2 generations. Remember, it affected the grandparents as well. And now the parents. So it makes sense and it looks predictable that their children are also prone. So the nocebo is taking shape. Can you see that? Now let's really give the power to the negative belief. This nocebo, let's give it some power. Let's add in some contributing factors. This is where non-blood relatives like myself begin to buy into the nocebo of dementia. First of all, the standard American diet, the SAD diet. It even includes an elevated emotion directly tied to this experience, SAD. Check, yes. You know, I suffered from the SAD diet most of my life. And because I cooked, Mark did too. So did my children, right? We didn't always eat healthy. In fact, we very rarely ate healthy. We ate what was convenient, what we liked. High blood sugar. So for me, that's a check, right? I've talked about that. And sugar is one of the leading factors in brain illness. So check. High blood pressure. For me, no longer an issue, but at one time it definitely was. And for some in this family, it still is. Check, right? Yes, and check. Chronic stress. Seriously, who isn't? Who isn't? And chronic stress is a leading factor of all illnesses. All illnesses. Remember, chronic stress kicks in the stress hormones, downgrades our genes of health. When we are in chronic stress, we are not rejuvenating, repairing, and renewing new cells. Sleep issues, again, most of us check. Fear, worry, negative people, yes? We have even discussed a family lineage of fear and worry. Fear of the worst case scenario. It runs in this family, fear and worry. The elevated trauma and suffering, the stories of the elevated trauma and suffering, which equates to what? That's right, negative people, worried people, scared people, worst case scenario type people. These are the people. If you're given many options, it could be this or this. Fear goes to the worst case right away and heightens it, and the elevated emotions of as if it was already happening come into play. Worst case scenario type people. These are the people that also, well, if you think that's bad, you should hear what happened to me. Do you know anybody like that? Are you like that? Do you say this very often? Watch yourself, because it's a clue as to what is in this belief here. If you think that's bad, you should hear what happened to me, right? Ratchet it up, get it elevated. The kind of conversations that always lead to something like this. Oh, I know exactly how you feel, because although yours was bad, mine was even worse. Let me tell you about it. Do you know anybody in that category? And many, many who fall into worry and more worry, and then discussions of the worst case scenario with lots of imagination and vivid descriptions, what it will be like when the worst case scenario takes place. And remember, most of these people believe that they're in the unlucky group also. So it has to be the worst case scenario that's going to happen. That's Murphy's Law. So luck of the draw, right? So lots of imagination and vivid descriptions, a whole lot of futurizing the worry into a foreseeable outcome. Right? Hasn't happened yet. But our body doesn't know that, our subconscious doesn't know that. And when we play out that scenario as if it is true, the subconscious goes through it as if it is true. Right? So futurizing the worry. I want you to hear this. It may or may not happen, but you can futurize the worry into a foreseeable outcome. In the case of illness, you can downgrade your own genes. You can kick in that autonomic nervous system, which will create the pharmacy within your body to bring about that foreseeable outcome. You can make it come true. And this isn't for guilt, right? We all have enough guilt. We don't need to be guilting ourselves into, oh my God, I caused this. That's not it, right? That's not it. But be aware of your own tendencies. So once you futurize this worry into a foreseeable outcome, then physically and emotionally, you are experiencing the imagined outcome. And most people will discuss this more than once because it must be discussed with everyone. Let's say that it's a family member, right? Every family member has a right to know what's going on. So the worst case scenario is discussed many, many times over. And the body experiences this over and over and over again. And I want you to hear. If you are telling the story of another family member, let's say I'm discussing this with somebody in the family of what's happening with either of these parents, my body goes through it. Absolutely does. Why? Because I'm empathetic. 2, because I'm going through it as if, right? 3, I'm a storyteller, so I add the details. So my body goes through it as well. I want you to hear that. This is how a nocebo can get planted in even non-blood relatives of the people with the disease. But let's pause here for a moment. Let's pause here. And even though the discussions, right, could be centered on somebody else, in our case parents, these subconscious beliefs are being formed for you or me when we participate. So I want us to pause here for just a moment. Just pause, right? We don't have to do this. We can do it differently. So let me cover this for a moment, how it can play out, kind of a scenario. Let's say that we're talking about a parent, our parent, and they forget what day it is, right? That's common. It's even common for me, but now I'm heightened, right? My awareness is heightened. And we go into a discussion about the progression of the disease, right? And this is common. This isn't judgment. This isn't, right, negativity. We do this. It's our awareness. That's what we're going to change from here on out. And then we talk about how we're noticing it more and more, right? The progression of the disease. How they're forgetting more and more, forgetting more things, such as what day it is. And then we include, that they forgot who visited yesterday. And they forgot what they had for breakfast. And it's only 11 a.m. They already forgot, right? And we start to notice these things. We start to discuss it. And we start to put it in the context of this progressing disease. It's getting worse, right? A lot of people will say that. And then later, we ourselves have a senior moment. And it's important that we have now labeled it a senior moment. I'm getting older, but I'm not a senior. That's a label I should be really careful in using, right? It has a lot of implications. And we might say, oh no, maybe I'm developing dementia, right? And then we tell somebody about our experience. And it's all in good fun. And we laugh at ourselves, and they laugh, right? And then they tell us about their senior moment. And we think we just had a humorous moment. But the subconscious, all this time, is recording all of the events. The parents' events and what we just discussed. And it's cataloging them. Remember, our subconscious mind, the memory holder, likes to be efficient. It catalogs like events. It files them all together. So Alzheimer's or dementia has its own file. A file of beliefs, if you might. And you're witnessing the decline of loved ones. And you inherited risk factors. Plus you have risk factors associated with your own health habits, such as blood sugar, maybe alcohol, chronic stress, right? So you add those in, and then you declare to yourself and others that you had a senior moment. And that senior moment, that label, has a lot of meaning. And that was exactly like the moments that your loved ones with Alzheimer's are having. And it's all getting cataloged and stored in your belief system. And the subconscious mind is not your analytical mind. Remember, this is your prefrontal cortex. It's what makes us different from other animals. This is our analytical, thinking, analyzing mind. It's not that. That's not what the subconscious is. Your analytical mind can screen out what's real. In this case, you don't have Alzheimer's or dementia. In this case, you are not a senior, right? And then it can also screen out what's not real. And what's not real is that you would be showing all of the signs of Alzheimer's. Therefore, you must be in the early stages of it. That's the difference between the subconscious and the conscious mind. So when you don't have your conscious, analytical mind kicked in and activated, the subconscious is recording. It's like a sponge. It stores all the memories. And its job is not to analyze it. Remember, that's the prefrontal cortex. It just records it and files it away as it came in. And the beginnings of the belief that you are now aging and having senior moments, and the belief that you're seeing the similarities of what you are experiencing and what they are experiencing, is starting to get filed in that Alzheimer's file in your subconscious. I want you to see how we look for the similarities. We absolutely do. Why? Because we're geared towards the worst case scenario. The differences would mean that we don't have it. The similarities would mean that we might. So worst case scenario rules out unless we have our conscious mind, our analytical mind screening this for us. And if you're not fully conscious and aware of this process, the survival mind kicks into action, kicks in here. Again, it's geared toward the worst case scenario. You've just now cataloged a bunch of similarities between you and these people with a diagnosed brain illness, such as dementia or Alzheimer's. And like I said when I opened this session, we can accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts and ideas that are equal to our present emotional state and our internal belief system. And when we do, we program our autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals to signal certain genes that either help us or harm us. This is how that takes effect. And when it happens subconsciously, you're not even aware that it's happening. You only see the effects. Awareness in and of itself is curable. You have a prefrontal cortex. You have an analytical mind. Be careful what you store in your subconscious belief system. So again, if we believe that we're prone to dementia, Alzheimer's, or any health condition, and then we feed that narrative. We feed the narrative I want you to hear. I've been guilty of that these last few weeks. We can kick in and begin to program our autonomic nervous system to act in accordance with that disease or illness. And I've covered this many, many times. The subconscious mind, which is the holder of our beliefs. The subconscious mind stores our memories and files away the events, beliefs, and memories in like file cabinets. It wants to be effective. So in this case, it's dementia. And then the subconscious mind is programmed to be right. Again, remember, our beliefs must be true. Otherwise, they're not a belief. We don't believe in things that are false to us. We don't believe in things that are false to us. They may be false in reality. But if it's our deep-held belief, we truly believe it to be true. And the beliefs and the subconscious mind control the autonomic nervous system, which is in charge of all of your body functions, including the functions that affect your brain health. And it will kick in or throttle back the functions that produce health or produce illness and disease based solely on your belief. And this is the placebo or the nocebo in action. So before we go on, I want to highlight a positive placebo experiment to illustrate the power of thoughts and your beliefs. I learned about this in the hypnotherapy school. On a day in the fall of 1981, 8 men, it was a very limited study, in their 70s stepped out of a van in front of a converted monastery in New Hampshire. They shuffled. A few of them arthritically stooped, a couple with canes. Then they passed through the door of this monastery and entered a time warp. It was designed this way. Perry Como crooned on the vintage radio. Ed Sullivan welcomed guests on a black and white TV. Everything inside, including the books on the shelves and the magazines lying around, were designed to conjure 1959. This was to be the men's home for 5 days as they participated in a radical experiment cooked up by a very young psychologist named Ellen Langer. She's very famous. She's done some really great research projects. Now, the subjects were in good health, but age had left its mark. And this was before 75 was the new 55. So before arriving, the men were assessed on such measures as dexterity, grip strength, flexibility, hearing and vision, memory and cognition. Probably the closest thing that a gerontologist of the time could come up with to test biomarkers of age. Langer predicted the numbers would be quite different after 5 days, when the subjects would emerge from what was to be fairly intense psychological intervention. The men in the experimental group were told not to merely to reminisce about this early era, but to inhabit it as if it were true and happening. Inhabit it, to make a psychological attempt to be the person they were 22 years ago. We have good reason to believe that if you are successful at this time, Langer told the men, you will feel as you did in 1959. From the time they walked through the doors, they were treated as if they were younger. The men were told that they would even have to take their own belongings upstairs themselves, even if they had to do it one shirt at a time. Each day they discussed sports from their time, Johnny Unitas, Wilt Chamberlain. They discussed current events, the first U.S. satellite launch, or dissected the movie they had just watched, Anatomy of a Murder with Jimmy Stewart. They spoke about these late 50s artifacts and events in the present tense. This was one of Langer's chief priming strategies, the present tense. Nothing, no mirrors, no modern clothing, no photos, except portraits of their much younger selves, spoiled the illusion that they were 22 years younger. At the end of this day, the men were tested again. On several measures, they outperformed a control group that had come earlier to the monastery but didn't imagine themselves back in the skin of their younger selves, though they were encouraged to reminisce. No, these men were suppler, showed greater manual dexterity, and sat taller. They all sat taller, just as Langer had guessed. And perhaps most improbable, their sight improved, their vision improved. Independent judges said they looked younger. This was after 5 days. The experimental subjects had put their mind in an earlier time, and their bodies went along for the ride. Upon leaving, the men broke out into a spontaneous game of touch football. Remember, they walked in with canes as they waited for the bus back to Cambridge. A few years earlier, Langer and one of her students, Aaliyah Crum, conducted a study published in the journal Psychological Science involving 84 hotel chambermaids. The maids had mostly reported that they didn't get much exercise in a typical week. The researchers primed the experimental group to think differently about their work by informing them that cleaning rooms was fairly serious exercise, as much, if not more, than the Surgeon General recommended. Once their expectations, their beliefs, shifted, those maids lost weight relative to a control group, and also improved on other measures like body mass index and hip to waist ratio, and all the factors were held constant. The only difference was the change in their mindset. The results were almost too good, and both studies had its detractors, still does. Believe it or don't, the choice is always yours. Now, we learned about this in the school because of the power of your mind to make physical changes. So believe it or don't, right, the studies are out there. They have detractors, they do. But the choice is yours. So, can you imagine just for a moment, this is where I get really excited, that this choice isn't so much as believing in a scientific research project as it is in choosing whether you feed the placebo or the nocebo. I can believe this study to be true. I absolutely do, and I cite it many times with my clients. I buy into the placebo. You can choose. And imagine the choice isn't so much as to the scientific validity as it is in the placebo or the nocebo. All right, remember, I said earlier, and this is where I get excited again, the placebo and nocebo are results of your own belief system. And in the system, you are the controller. You have power over your beliefs, which gives you considerable power in your life. So now it's time to talk about the power of your mind to promote health. Again, you get more what you focus on. Focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. The power of your mind to produce the healthy lifestyle you want, and the power of your mind to give you the foundation for your best life yet. So first, and very powerful, a risk factor is just that, a risk factor. It's not a life sentence. We've talked about this. And whether you develop a disease or illness you have a higher risk factor for, there are many, many factors that you must take into consideration. So just thinking positively, I don't want you to think is the cure-all. You may still, right, have an illness or a disease. But a risk factor is just that, a risk factor. You can absolutely turn a risk factor into a nocebo. So, I have many risk factors. I have high blood sugar, right? I control it with medication, working on controlling it without. I am losing weight, but I am still in the obese category. And more importantly, I was overweight for decades, most of my adult life. My blood pressure is under control now without medications, but it wasn't always. Until recently, actually, when I lost weight and started exercising. I used to drink alcohol more regularly, right? It was a way to relieve stress, which brings me to stress. I was really stressed out, very stressed out. Thank you, Markel. It was self-induced because my belief is that chronic stress is self-induced, unless you're in a war zone or something. But for most of us, right, we are safe, we are stable, we live a really good life. For most of us, chronic stress is self-induced. And I was not physically active, and I ate the standard American diet, the SAD diet, forever, probably as long as I can remember. Now, my grandmother did have dementia, but it was much later in life. And both her and my grandfather had heart issues. There is also cancer in our family. So here's how I address these risk factors. My risk of any chronic disease was more attributed to my own habits, not the illnesses of my family members. Look it up for yourself and see just how much of an increased risk you are for whatever disease. So for me, one of the increased risks will be for colon cancer. It runs in our family. Take the appropriate actions, get the proper screenings, right? So this is what risk factors should do. Encourage you to take positive, healthy actions, right? Get your proper screenings. That's huge. Whether you have cancer or heart disease or diabetes, get the proper screenings. If you do happen to have something, catch it early and get the appropriate treatment. It's much easier to treat when you get it early. Eat healthy for your risk factors. So for me, heart disease, colon cancer, diabetes, right? So if you have risk factors for heart disease, eat a heart healthy diet. They're all out there. We are not stupid, and we are not immune, or sorry, not immune. We are not denied access to the information we need to make good, healthy choices. If you have risk factors for certain cancers, like colon cancer, eat healthy for your particular cancer risk. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Just do it. Just do it. And here's where you're the most powerful. Think and believe yourself to be healthy. Be positive and optimistic. Practice gratitude. Turn on your healthy body systems. All of those turn on the healthy genes. All of those promote rejuvenation, regeneration, repair. You control your beliefs. Turn on your healthy body systems. You control your beliefs. Therefore, you have direct control over your subconscious. Again, that analytical, conscious mind, the prefrontal cortex, gives you the power. It may only be 5 or 10% of the power of your mind. That's because we don't use it. We allow the subconscious to be on autopilot. Turn on your conscious mind. Have direct control over your subconscious. This is what controls your autonomic nervous system. So you can program your autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals to signal the certain genes that promote health. That's your very own placebo effect. Or, and this is big, you can believe in your risk factor. You can focus on it. And remember, your energy goes where your attention goes. And you can turn on your very own nocebo effect. The worry kicks in stress hormones. The stress hormones turn off rejuvenation and regeneration of your cells. Your body goes into inflammation because of the stress, which diverts your immune system into fighting the inflammation, which was caused by, guess what? Thought alone. You absolutely can think yourself sick. You can think yourself old. You can think yourself diseased. Or you can think yourself well. The choice is yours. This is why I get excited. You have a choice. Believe yourself to be well. It's not just the thoughts, though, that count. You can't just say positive affirmations in the mirror. You must believe them to be true. It's the deep-held subconscious beliefs. So if I'm still worried here about blood sugar, doesn't matter what I say up here. It matters what I believe here. Remember, the beliefs of the subconscious are programmed to be true. Our beliefs must be true. Whether positive or negative, your power is in what you choose to believe, how you choose to see the world. Now, I can't guarantee you that you will never experience a health issue. That's a job for a much higher power than me. I want to say that again. I can't guarantee that you'll never experience a health issue. Now, that's a job for a much higher power than me. But I ask you, if you are positive, optimistic, grateful, healthy in body, mind, and spirit, you have overall wellness, and you do have a health issue, an illness or a disease, do you think you might come through it better with a healthy mindset, a wellness mindset? Or a mindset of negativity, fear, worry, stress, and a deep-seated belief in the worst-case scenario? This is where your true power lies. This is where my passion to help others gets really fired up. This is where you can make a real difference. And you can make a difference in all aspects of your life by practicing the power of positive beliefs. Remember, we live from how we believe ourselves to be. We live from here. We experience life from who we are, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. So you can make changes in all aspects of your life by practicing the power of positive beliefs. The placebo effect can be transformed to all aspects of your life. But know that you put into place both placebos and nocebos in your relationships, your career, your finances, your health, and more. Now, I can only tell you from experience how it has changed me, and all of you have seen the change. I know my purpose, and it's to share my experiences with you. I want to share this newfound wealth and health and happiness and wellness, abundance and joy. I want to share this with you. This is my purpose. So that you might experience the same miraculous transformation in your own life. And when you do, for me, that's the greatest gift of all. So until next week, please love yourself well, because remember, if you're watching this, you matter to me.